Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Top Tips for Improving Your ITSM Tool RFP Process. It's a presentation by SunView Software for Bright Talk's ITSM and ITIL Framework Summit. So let's get started here. Taking on the speaking roles in today's presentation will be myself, Jamie Spector. I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at SunView, and Eric Dickman. He's SunView's VP of Marketing. Say hello, Eric.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. We're really excited to be with you all this afternoon, and we're ready to get started with our presentation. So before we can begin, just a few housekeeping notes. This webinar will be available shortly after its conclusion. I will be able to put it up on SlideShare, or you can access it via Bright Talk. Share this webinar and check out the supplemental content included in the attachments panel of your module. We'll get into that in a second. And if you have a question regarding anything that is covered during this webinar, use the Ask a Question button at the top screen of your module and submit the question to the webinar panel, and we'll have a little bit of time for some Q&A at the end, so we'll try to get to those. So a quick agenda. The main feature presentation will be top tips for improving your ITSM tool RFP process. Then we'll get into some takeaways and recommendations. And then we'll have a quick spotlight on changing your service desk featuring ServiceSmart technology. And finally, a Q&A. So the goal of this webinar is to provide some real, tangible insights into improving the design of your ITSM tool RFP, as well as giving recommendations for what you should be asking about so you can make the right decisions when prospecting vendors. So real quick, that supplemental material I was talking about, it's a Gartner report. So it takes a deep dive at the points that you'll see throughout this presentation. The report is included with our SunView newsletter, and you can download it for free in the link that's in the attachments section. So go check that out. So without further ado, let's get started here. So I'm going to do some scene setting, and then we're going to do, sort of where people sort of see themselves when they're beginning the RFP process. From there, we'll get to the core of the topic, maybe discuss some of the challenges, and then we'll take it from there and wrap it up with some key takeaways. So the day has come. You've been dreading it, and now it's here. You've been given the gargantuan task of replacing your organization's IT service management tool solution. You understand the implications of this project. The solution will lay the foundation of how IT processes, people, and technology come together to better serve the business. You set off right away designing your request for proposal, so there's no time to waste. So first things first, organizations must have an IT service management solution that aligns with business priorities. So here's a few scenarios where organizations might decide to replace their current ITSM solution. So some of these might be familiar to some of you. You've outgrown the homegrown. Your organization has matured beyond where simple ticketing, emails, and spreadsheets can get the job done, and your business requires something a bit more sophisticated. And it often means, going with something with ITIL best practices. Your current solution is too bloated and or costly to maintain. This one kind of speaks for itself. Your current solution is difficult to use and not easily customizable to meet business needs. You often find yourself bottlenecked by the complexities of the system, or inefficient processes are just too rigid in their implementation. Your current solution doesn't meet compliance requirements, so this is a big one for specialized industries like energy, government, healthcare, etc. Or you're just simply unhappy with your current implementation and you're ready to look elsewhere. So where do you begin? Here's just a really high-level list of where you would start with your RFP and before you can approach vendors. So things like budget, your framework, technological requirements, and the RFP itself. And here are the associated challenges. There's a lot of challenges, but here are some key ones we've highlighted. So you've got your difficulties in identifying which tools and processes are vital to the business and not just IT itself. Making sense of the cost of the product itself and the long-term value it will bring to the business. Management, IT stakeholders are often rigid in their thinking, maybe having trouble buying into new ideas or technology, so communication is key on that one. There might be difficulties in evolving the RFP requirements for the present and future instead of relying on just what worked in the past, maybe 3 to 5 years ago. Creating an RFP is more than just a boilerplate checklist of products and features, so that's kind of a pitfall that a lot of people fall into. And, creating an RFP that selects the best fitting ITSM tool solution for your organization. So, that's easier said than done. So I found this quote interesting. Gartner says that by 2020, 90% of organizations that invest in an ITSM tool solution without factoring in their organizational and process maturity will fail to obtain the intended ROI from their investment. So the bottom line here, organizations must think outside of their IT bubble and find a solution that focuses on business priorities for now and in the future. And we'll definitely touch on that point as we go forward. So let's get into the meat of this here and start with number 1 of the top 10 tips to improve your ITSM RFP project. So, number 1, always start fresh. So, ITSM definitely needs a fresh start when you begin your ITSM tool replacement RFP. So don't get caught up in what may have worked before. This is really important because IT is always changing. What may have been appropriate 3 to 5 years ago will probably fail you in the future. Not always the case, but it's definitely something to be cognizant of. Eric will definitely touch on this later in the presentation. Take stock of your current and future needs during your planning process. Really focus on what will help you in the now and over the next few years. Focus on what will fuel immediate growth. How will your solution fuel or support growth? So that's definitely important to think about. Don't reuse or recycle sections from past RFPs. This is a really big one. It's really important that you just completely start with a clean slate. Don't reuse anything from past RFPs, and don't design an RFP specifically for a solution before you've determined all of your needs and specifications. So that's something I think maybe a few of us might be guilty of, is having our own biases. And you might think you need a certain solution that can solve something, but before you can even get to that step, be sure to look at the requirements that serve the needs of your technological needs and the business itself. And be sure to learn from your past mistakes, but don't be so stuck in the past or what may have worked before. You can always learn from what worked in the past, but when you're creating your RP, it is important that you start fresh. So, number 2, define key discernible requirements. So it's all about looking at the big picture. ITSM tools must provide measurable business value, so this is huge. Don't do IT just for IT's sake. The business must be the top priority overall. Don't get too caught up in all the technical details of an implementation. That's only part of the story. So a lot of times, as technical people do, you can get caught up in the technical requirements, obviously. So while these are very important, they shouldn't be overlooked. Those technical requirements really are just a piece of the implementation. Requirements should also focus on the people, processes, how those technologies work together, and how those benefit the business itself. So we'll have a little bit more on that in a minute. Gartner recommends doing a Moscow analysis. That is a must-have, should-have, could-have, won't have. Some of you may have heard of this, to designate relative priority of different feature requirements. So a great way to identify, prioritize RFP requirements is to use the Moscow analysis method. It really can help you narrow down the scope of your vendor tool search and really cut to the core of what you need from a solution. So it really helps you to kind of craft your RFP, and when you are able to approach a vendor, you know exactly what you're looking for and how to prioritize those requirements. So here's just a quick model. You can see the must-have starts at the top, the crucial requirements identified during the definition phase. Then the should-have, that really touches more on implementation. The could-have, these are, stuff that you may want, something like a nice dashboard or analytics, but not really essential to your processes. And then, requirements are documented, but they need to be deferred until the procurement project. So that's won't have yet, something you're keeping an eye on for the future. So number 3, stay focused on business value. So don't forget about ROI, guys. Business value and ROI can sometimes be lost in IT. It's not a revenue-generating department. So remember what we talked about regarding just looking at technical requirements versus the business as a whole. Be sure to focus on real-world business outcomes of your tool implementation. So, will the tool result in less open tickets? Will the tool help us plan for better compliance audits? Will the tool help us to maximize help desk resources? It's these sort of real-world applications that will really help you cut to the core of serving the business rather than just what IT needs. And then remember the Moscow analysis when you're getting to these items. How will it affect the business? So take an extensive look at the organization's current infrastructure, processes, technical requirements, obviously, budget, maturity, all of these things sort of work together. Calculate the potential business impacts the tools will have on the organization. How will those new processes change workflow and cross-team collaboration, for example? And then without careful focus on planning and strategy, an ITSM tool implementation may result in more cost or strain on organizational resources in the long run. So remember that Gartner quote from what we showed before in a few slides back. Organizations that don't factor in their organizational process maturity will often fail their intended ROI estimates for their ITSM tool implementation. So that's just important to keep that in mind. All right, number 4, don't fall for bells and whistles. So I always like to think this is really anything you're doing in life when you're buying something expensive. Substance over razzle dazzle, obviously. Don't fall for the car salesman mentality. So a good example is maybe you would see if you're on a dealership and you see an SUV you might like. It's got all the features. It's fully loaded, but it gets terrible gas mileage. So if you're someone with a long commute or someone that needs to have that gas mileage to make it worth the value, then that's something you need to be aware of. So it's the same thing with ITSM tools. You can compare this to an ITSM tool that may have a slick dashboard or analytics features that are really cool and really exciting, but maybe they don't offer efficient automation of the critical processes that you've identified in your Moscow analysis. So just something to keep in mind. Look closely at the platform. Sometimes features are built on top of old code or cumbersome legacy systems. So this is huge. This is something you definitely don't want to leave out of your RFP. In IT, we all love new technology. Who doesn't? But does it work as advertised? So get the validation on those new features. Try the product out if you can. Read reviews. Ask around. Do all of your due diligence so you can get a clear sense of how the product works in real-world scenarios that are applicable to your business. And then finally, do all those fancy features excel in providing value to the business. So remember the Moscow method again. I'm going to keep banging this drum. How will those extra features support the requirements you identified that will bring business value or identified as your musts? All right, so head on to number 5. Tweak RFP requirements based on delivery models. So you're going to want to definitely evaluate how your ITSM delivery model will be licensed and delivered. So decide how, is it going to be named or concurrent licensing? Is it going to be cloud on-premise? Is it going to be some sort of hybrid model? Look at all of these things and be sure that your RFP is taking those requirements into account before approaching a vendor. So a good example is, something around security. An ITSM tool solution may deal with security a lot differently for cloud versus on-premise. So make sure you're looking at how those delivery models are delivered, I guess, and keep that stuff in mind. Okay, so I'm going to hand it off to Eric, and he's going to take you through the rest of these points. Eric?
Thanks, Jamie. So number 6 is really focusing on vision, not functionality. And I think Jamie touched on this a little bit. But what we're really trying to do is understand that technology, it changes quickly. And a lot of the software that's purchased and deployed within organizations today, it lasts for a long time. Some people are still running on 20-year-old technology in many cases. And so you really need to understand that your choices that you're making today have to work as things move into the future. So what about the challenges of integration? These systems rarely live in isolation. There's all kinds of integrations that have to happen, and you need to have a solution that can adapt as other systems come online or older systems go offline. What about the various business processes that are internal to the organization? How does the system work with that? What about training and end user adoption? We need to focus on all of these as to what the vision of this solution is going to be. The platform has to be flexible and adaptable. Again, the business is not static. Things are always changing. New technologies are coming to bear. Business processes changed. So are you building on a technology base that's proprietary and closed, or one that's open and allows changes as you move forward? So look at change and say it's going to be inevitable. Can you do these changes yourself? Do you need to bring in outside help? Is it going to be something that requires a consultant every time, going back to the vendor to see if certain changes can be implemented into the system? You also need to understand what investments the vendor is making in the software solution. What's the roadmap? Is this a product that is going to be sunsetted in 5 years? Is it merging with something else? Are multiple products coming together? Or are there investments being made in new technology and new functionality? And are those the kind of investments that are going to be good for your business? And, what are the skills in the marketplace to actually use the system and program? As you look at a typical implementation, the best way is always to start small, to get a proof of concept, to get something up and running, to prove that the software works, build confidence in it, add additional processes. So maybe you start with something small, you start with service management, then you add in things like CMDB, asset, work on DevOps, and eventually sort of move out into the rest of the organization, adding in facilities, HR, broadening out into the enterprise. But the key is to start small, develop confidence in the solution, and then build the vision for how that solution can truly affect the enterprise in a positive way. So, number 7, make sure that the vendors understand your business. And if you can see this cartoon, this is typically what happens, and it tends to be a communication problem. Everybody has different views in terms of what they want a solution to do, but not everybody understands or speaks the same language, and so many times implementations fail because everybody is not on the same page in terms of what kind of a solution they're looking for and what the solution is ultimately expected to do. And you don't want a software project to fail just because it missed expectations. So does the IT department, does it truly understand what the end user requirements are? Do they understand where this solution is going to have the biggest impact to the business? Do the end users really understand the scope of the project, the deliverables and the dates? So, people get excited when they hear the new software is coming, but do they know what's going to be in the first release? Do they know when that release is going to be? Do they know when additional pieces of functionality are going to be enabled and rolled out? It's very important that everybody understands sort of the life of this project. And really, does management understand how success will be measured? People can be very happy with the product, but unless it's achieving its ROI, unless it's moving the metrics that were agreed to when management decided to fund the project, ultimately it could be unsuccessful. So it's very important that they understand. And then on the vendor side, do they understand what is required versus nice to have? What functionality is out of the box versus customization? Who's responsible for the changes and when are they expected? So maybe there are certain things that you want that are unique to your implementation and the vendor has agreed to put those in the product, but are they going to be there day one, or is it something that they are going to be added in the future release? And if so, when is that going to be delivered? And that all gets to the whole point of deliverables. Have they been clearly defined, or have expectations been set between you as a customer and the vendor to understand exactly what you're getting and when, and what again are going to be their criteria for success. I think it's really important to look at an RFP as a baseline comparison between vendors. What you're doing is you're creating a set of questions that each vendor can answer so that you can easily compare one solution to the other. But it's important to understand exactly what that also means. It can be the difference between yes, the solution can do it versus yes, the solution does it. So, for example, integrations. Well, there's no software package out there that integrates to everything, but many of them have connectors that integrate with certain kinds of services. And so maybe there is a capability to do that integration built in the product, but there is not a pre-built integration to a specific product or service. And so it's very important to understand that, what exactly is out-of-the-box functionality and what is something that there is a capability in the product to do, but there may be some additional work to do that. What's sort of included in the license that you're purchasing? What's an add-on? As you're looking at the scope of the purchase, it's very important to understand exactly what you're getting for the license. What requires additional services, what's part of the services that the vendor provides, Again, you look at integrations, what are the out-of-box ones, what are the capabilities, and which are some that may be completely customized for your particular instance. And, what's the support model? Is it 24 hours? Is it 7 days a week? Is it on-site? Is it over the phone? Is it email? Just to be able to understand all that. And then finally, again, to look at the roadmap. Where is this product going? What kinds of enhancements is the vendor going to do? And what direction do you see them taking in terms of the strategy for the product? So when you look at this, you have this checklist then from each of the vendors that answers questions in the way that you want to frame them, and it gives you a good way to compare one solution against the other. And that's really all it is at that point. It's just a level playing field where you can kind of compare one against the other. But it's not going to magically make one software appear better than the other. It's just a way of framing it so that you can compare each of them on your terms. Number 8, embracing change. So, change is a constant, right? We all know that change is inevitable, and we have to sort of have flexibility to adapt to change. We just don't want to re-implement what we've already done on a new tool. That's really not a good way to embrace change. And unfortunately, that's what often happens is we get bogged down in terms of the limitation of the tools that we have, and we build a system based on those limitations. We build processes based on those limitations. And then when you go to a new tool, it's very easy to sort of look at the processes that you have without fully realizing that those processes have been limited by the old tool set. So I think it's very important that you understand your processes and workflows and really understand the optimum state for those, not necessarily how they've been implemented today, which might be a factor in the limitations of a previous tool set. Or maybe there are some things that are done manually today, but with the right tool set could be automated, and you want to understand what the benefits would be of that automation. So what are the metrics then that these processes would influence, and can you measure them? Because again, you won't know success unless you are able to measure them. And where is your business heading in terms of new technologies? What kinds of things is the organization looking at? Maybe implementations of certain technology that are happening in one area that may affect your ITSM solution. Is your company growing, expanding? Are you merging? Are you bringing in other departments? Are you having to take, maybe one set of technology and merge it with another, maybe through acquisition? What are the various channels that are supported today? We're living in a world where, everybody has multiple devices. Does your service desk, does it support all of these various channels? And what is the expectation in terms of the levels of support across channels? And then we've already touched on integrations. There is always opportunities for better integration to allow more information to be passed and shared amongst systems. Number 9, taking calculated risks. I think this is important because it's very easy when you're making these kinds of large investments to play it either overly safe or be too risky in terms of your ambitions about what the system can do. And so I think it's important to take educated risks. Be bold, look at these technologies carefully, understand what the trends are, understand where certain standards are heading, look at the use cases of competitors, of other players in the industry, where are people being successful using these technologies, and how are they using them in innovative ways. Many times we get so siloed and so focused on the way that we're doing business today that we don't really recognize how others have taken advantage of technology to improve processes, maybe in ways that we haven't thought of. So I think it's very important to sort of look at these use cases and see how other people could be using this technology. And that's one of the things in an RFP that I think that's very important, is that when you're asking a set of questions, don't just ask about, your models today, but ask some open-ended questions about how this technology could be used for things in the future. An example of some of this great new technology, artificial intelligence, we hear about this in the news practically every day now. Artificial intelligence is very much a buzzword, but what does it mean to your organization? You know it's coming, you know it's going to have a place, but exactly how is that going to fit into your process? So how is the vendor utilizing artificial intelligence in their solution? What are their plans for it? How are they integrating it into what they're providing out of the box? And how might you be able to take advantage of it in your business processes? Machine learning, there are great capabilities to be able to leverage all of the data you have and do things with machine learning. But again, how does that affect your business processes? Predictive analytics, we've gone from an era where, we had static reports to interactive dashboards to now going to predictive tools where they can actually look into the future and predict things. So how could that impact your organization? These are all technologies with great potential. Chatbots as well, the self-service channel being interactive and automated. So there are ways to be very bold and take risks with some of this technology, but in order to do that, you really have to understand where your organization is headed and where certain technology could give you the greatest return for the investment. This is another slide from Gartner talking about, where they see things in their technology trends for 2017. There's obviously a lot of things around intelligence. We see it in the devices we have, in the portability, the Internet of Things. So things are certainly going digital. We've seen a lot now starting to take place around augmented reality. You hear a lot of things in the news about blockchain. There are big changes coming with some of these technologies. And, do the platforms, does the vendor have a platform that supports these? Do they have a roadmap? Do they have a stated goal and direction in terms of where they're going to go and how they're going to support these? And so the last one, number 10, is to stay objective. So I don't know how many of you have seen this episode of The Simpsons. It's one of my favorites, is with Danny DeVito as Homer Simpson's brother, who happened to own a car company, and asked Homer if he would design a car that had all the features and functions that Homer wanted in a car. So he was sent off to do this work on his own, and ended up coming up with this monstrosity. And I think this is a real challenge when you're doing an RFP. It's very easy to get into feature and function overload and to say we want this and we want that, and you end up sort of crafting an RFP that has feature bloat. That, yeah, maybe something checks all the boxes, but truly, are you going to implement all of this functionality? The reality is, according to Gartner, that many people are still very immature in their adoption of a lot of these ITIL processes. And if your organization sort of is at a lower level of maturity, how much of this fancy technology are you going to be able to take advantage of day one? It almost has to be a very modular, measured approach where you can add things over time, but not implement everything all at once. And so I think it's very important to stay objective. As Jamie said, you really want to start your RFP with a clean slate, not just taking over things that may have happened on a previous project or a previous purchase, but look at it and say, really, where do you want to go with this project? Where do you want this software to take you? Identify these key requirements, from the Moscow method. As Jamie mentioned, you want to focus on the ROI, the business value. How are you going to measure the success of this project? What are you going to see as the real return of the business value? And don't let all these products features sway your decision too much. Features are important. Functionality is important. Don't want to sell that short. But it's also important on how all of that works together, because ultimately you want to have high levels of end user adoption. You want to be able to make your business process smooth and see a positive return on your investment, and sometimes too much can dissuade that from actually happening. Determine how your tool is going to be delivered. Is it going to be on-premise? Is it going to be in the cloud? What are the methods of integration? How is all that going to work together? And then the points we just talked about. You need to have a design that prepares you for the future. You need to set the expectations with the vendors, make sure everybody's communicating, make sure everybody understands what you're trying to accomplish and what their responsibilities are. You need to make the necessary changes based on the wants and needs of your business. Don't just take old processes and put them into the system. Look at what the needs of the business really are. Take a few risks, be bold, but stay objective. understand that there may be tools, there may be solutions out there that you didn't even consider, but more correctly aligned to your business. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jamie.
Thanks, Eric. That was really interesting. Some really good information to kind of take note of. Okay, great. So thanks for sticking around, everybody. And before we get to the Q&A, I just wanted to take a brief moment to look at what we have at SunView, some of the really cool stuff that we're offering right now. Is our flagship product, ChangeGear 7. It's what we bill as the world's smartest ITSM service desk solution. We were one of the first to really bring AI and machine learning to the service desk. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Here's kind of a few quick hits. You can see we're doing a lot of cool stuff with some of the things that Eric pointed to earlier when he was talking about, some of those new technologies and really trying to think about the business value that those new technologies bring rather than just being, simple buzzwords. So again, not going to spend too much time here. If you want to learn more, just visit our website, sunviewsoftware.com, or go ahead and email myself or Eric, and or just, leave a message here, and we'll get back to you. We can maybe set you up with a personalized demonstration. So here are the questions. If you have any comments or personal stories, or if you want to get in touch about our product, you can email me at jspector@sunviewsoftware.com or Eric at edickman@sunviewsoftware.com. So without further ado, we're going to kind of cap this off with our Q&A, and we'll see what we got here. It looks like we got a question here. Do you have any tips or recommendations for how to get the most out of meeting with a prospective ITSM tool vendor? So this is an interesting question, and we did touch on some of this earlier. Eric was talking more about, don't design for a process or a feature that you might like ahead of time, keeping an open mind, and really look at those top-line requirements that are important to you when you're designing your RFP. And try to avoid the Homer car monstrosity while you're at it. I think I could add on that ask vendors for a solution, not specific functionality, to kind of understate that point. And also a good point from that Gartner report that kind of adds along with this. You can find it in the attachments. Make the vendors write out how they'll specifically address your requirements. Don't let them just give you sort of a boilerplate. Here are our features. Have them actually sit down and write out how their product is tailored to meet those needs that you've outlined for them. If if they kind of balk or don't want to do that, or really don't want to work with you on that, you probably don't want to work with them. The vendor's probably just looking for a quick win, and that's certainly not what you need for an ITSM tool solution. Do you have anything to add on to that one, Eric?
No, I'd agree exactly with what you said there. I think it's just really important that you understand the product, and you're right. It's not just a list of features. It's a solution. It's a platform, something that you're going to have to live with for some time, and you want to make sure that it meets your needs, not only in terms of the features that it has, but its capabilities. Okay,
I think we have another question here. So what is the best way to achieve buy-in from your team and or management for an ITSM tool replacement project? So that's a good one too, and I kind of briefly talked about communication at the front of the presentation, but yeah, we didn't really get too much into buy-in. But yeah, I think it's communication just from day one, because an ITSM tool, it's not going to just affect the IT department. It's going to affect everyone, the end users, people in HR. Like everybody is going to be using these systems and processes and technology. So it's something that you really want to loop in, everyone who's going to be using it and kind of give some of the rationale. I guess that's all dependent on the size of the company and the organization. And also when speaking with management, you need to build a compelling business case. So that's where those requirements of how, hey, by introducing these tools that include AI and machine learning, we can actually reduce our our ticket volume by 30%. Things like that, real actionable points that you can make in your business case, I think will do wonders in getting buy-in on a project like this. Time is money, I think, in the eyes of management in IT. If you can really prove that your ITSM tool will save time, increase efficiency, and you have real statistics that you can point to, and I think that will be key there. Do you have anything to add on to that one, Eric?
Yeah, I would just say that over and over again we hear that end user satisfaction is very much top of mind. As Jamie mentioned earlier, we know that this is a cost function of the business. This isn't a sales function or a revenue generating function, but end user satisfaction is an important metric, and management pays attention to that. And I think the goal of a lot of these ITSM solutions is really to sort of reduce the friction so that end users are more satisfied, so that IT staff can handle more things more efficiently, and there are other things that people have to worry about, and the idea is to make this as frictionless as possible, and I think that's something that management really does keep an eye on.
Okay, great. I think that will do it for the questions, and once again, you can email me at jspector@sunviewsoftware.com. You can email Eric at edickman@sunviewsoftware.com. You can find us on Twitter. And go ahead and check out the website, check out the Gartner paper and the attachments, and if that will do it, that will do it. So thank you for attending, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.